What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the weekend college basketball betting preview. I'm Stuckey. Joining me, as always, on every Thursday, my fellow BBOC co-hosts, Mike Calabrese and Greg Waddel. We will get to some weekend looks, as always. We will talk the good and the bad from the week that was, and we will add a future to our portfolio shortly. So let's dive right in, gentlemen, and start with the good. Let's start positive as we always do. Greg, I'll throw it to you. Anything or anywhere you want to go from the week that was?
I want to put some shine on the role players for a couple, I think, national title contenders right now, because I feel like the national step back broad picture this season has been Johni Broome, how awesome Auburn is, Cooper Flagg, how awesome Duke is. Broome's out. Auburn still looks great. I think Mike's about to speak to a role player on Auburn that fits the mold of this. But two that I have my eye on as teams that can truly win 6 in March are Alabama and Iowa State. And when you think those teams, normally you think Mark Sears, Grant Nelson. Normally you think Tamin Lipsey, Keyshawn Gilbert. But these teams are deep with guys that can be the best player any given night. Alabama had Muhammad Diabate and Aiden Holloway both go for 22 in their win over Vanderbilt. Iowa State, following that loss to West Virginia, Joshua Jefferson comes out with 30 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 steals. I mean, that may have been the most stellar singular player line that I've seen all season. It's a good reminder that while the superstars drive the sport, especially at the very top, there's a couple teams that go 5 or 6 deep with just absolute star role players that any given night can pop off and beat you.
You want to follow up on that, Mike?
Yeah, just in terms of what Auburn has, I mean, we already knew they were a deep team, but Tahad Pettiford, when he has more of an opportunity, more usage, more minutes, I just want to give him this moment to say that I think he could be the difference for them in March if he can bottle some of this experience right now. Because with Broome on the shelf, as I said, more times than not, he has the ball in his hand in critical situations. Without his 24 points on just 13 shots, by the way, I don't think they escape Athens with that win. And I think this is really the kind of opportunity for a team that there's a lot of mouths to feed, to be honest. I mean, they have it, even with Broome on the bench, there's still so many options on the perimeter. So for him to get more time to kind of cook, to kind of feel more comfortable with the ball, being both a playmaker, facilitator, and someone who can certainly get his own shot, he has I always kind of bristle at the comparisons to any legends, but he's got a little bit of Iverson in him, the Georgetown Iverson, where he's so quick with that first step. He's able to generate his own shot. He can, hit from anywhere inside of 30 feet. So I really like the guy. It's interesting that I guess I would put it to you guys. How many games can Auburn lose with Broome out as long as they play well and 0 changes for you in terms of their overall ceiling? For me, what I've seen so far, I could see them drop 2 games in the next month before he's back, and I'm fine with it. I think they have answers for days, and I like what Pearl's done with his coaching staff as well to be able to cook up custom game plans for who he's playing in the rugged SEC. What do you think, Greg, in terms of, at any point would there be alarm bells going off for you if there are multiple losses with Broome on the shelf?
I really don't think so. At least to the heavyweights, the SEC, no. I mean, we'll see what they do against Tennessee at home this weekend. But Auburn's been so good as a program at home going back the last 5 years. I think 3 of 5 seasons they have 1 or less loss at home. So, man, this team, like you said, is so deep, so talented. Pettiford, by the way, I was looking up his KenPom player comps. The most similar efficiency season to what he's doing this year is Carson Edwards at Purdue. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like I have seen this before. That's a guy who led that team to new heights in March. So I'm with you. I don't expect this Auburn team to hit a blip at all here.
Yeah, I as long as Broome comes back healthy, my mind's not going to change at all. I do think that their offense takes a hit without Broome, and their rebounding as well. I know they've won both games without Broome, but Mississippi State, was 3 of 24 from 3. That was in Auburn. And then the Georgia game, they shoot 43% from 3. Georgia, and this is the problem for Georgia, by the way, their free throws. Georgia, horrendous from the line. That, if they get into the tournament, I think they project maybe as an 8-9 right now. Free throws for them and just bad turnovers are an issue. But I do think because I think in that game, Georgia basically stayed in it with rebounding and Newell inside. And I think with Cardwell, I mean, I know Cardwell went out in that game with an injury, which hurts, but with him, their defense still is fine at the rim. Obviously, their depth takes a bit of a hit. I don't think their offense is as good, and then their rebounding takes a little bit of a hit. But as long as Broome comes back, yeah, they're tier A for sure. As far as my good, I got to give credit to a rival in the state, Louisville, for what they've done. I know the ACC is down, but I thought Keyshawn Pryor was pretty important to what Louisville wanted to do. Obviously, they lost him. They had that game against Eastern Kentucky at home where they win by 2, and I'm like, this team is teetering. And since that game, they've won 8 in a row. And I know the ACC's down, but they beat Clemson, North Carolina, Pitt, and then they go to SMU and completely wax them. Chucky Hepburn had 16 assists. Rain Smith had 10 threes. So I got to give a lot of credit to Pat Kelsey. And looking at their schedule, man, I mean, I saw this tweet today that on KenPom, they're projected to win the rest of their games. That there's no Duke left on the schedule. It's Wake at home, then Georgia Tech, BC, Miami, NC State, Notre Dame, Florida State, Va Tech, Pitt at home, Cal, Stanford. This is a team that's probably going to rack up some wins. And so I'm impressed with what Pat Kelsey has done, especially with a short-handed roster compared to what he was expecting.
It's on that point real quick, just based on when you look at their schedule, the top teams they played, they had some hard-fought losses, but they lost those games. And when the schedule that you just laid out in the ACC, say they go and they win all but one for the regular season and they make it to, let's say, the ACC title game and lose to Duke, essentially, where do you think the committee is going to put them? Because yes, it's impressive stacking these wins, but I think the ACC, the committee at least will kind of share public perception that it's not in the same class as the Big Ten, as the SEC, as the Big 12. So do you think their ceiling is a 2, a 3?
No, not a 2. No. I mean, if they did that, you might get them. So, I mean, you're talking, 7 losses on the year, you're saying?
Yeah.
Not ACC champion. Ceiling probably 4, I would say. But maybe a more realistic spot for them to land up is end. I'm sure they might drop, let's see. I could see them dropping a couple more games. But I think that they're probably safe to get a 5 or a 6 seed as long as they don't implode. But I don't think they have the upside of a 2 or 3 because just of the rest of their schedule and how down the ACC is.
Feels like a terrifying 4 seed. Whatever 1 seed gets them is going to be absolutely petrified because they shoot so many threes. It's what are you even supposed to do with that?
Yeah, for sure. Let's get to the bad. I mean, low-hanging fruit. We talked about this in the last podcast. Tanner tried to entertain the fact of maybe backing Miami at Stanford. I said, absolutely not. I'm not trying to catch that knife. They lost by 37. Miami is in complete free fall mode. I don't know when you can bet them. It's bad. As bad as it gets for a power conference team. To think the money that was put into that team as well. I'm also going to throw the bad out there is Nebraska. They're in trouble. That you can't lose that game to USC. I thought it was a pretty good matchup and spot for them. They've now dropped 5 in a row, and they weren't in previous years. Nebraska at home in Big Ten play could rely on that, and against USC, and Nebraska always could get 3-point variance with the way that they play. That wasn't the case here. USC went 6 of 21. At 28% from 3. I mean, Nebraska's in real trouble here because we know that it isn't a team that's very reliable on the road. They now go to Wisconsin, home against Illinois, at Oregon. In about a week, they could be on the outside looking in. I think as of right now, they're probably out. And I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, after that win over UCLA at home, I would not have thought that we'd be here. Some bad losses, losing to Rutgers at home, USC at home, lose at Iowa. Not great for Hoiberg and company. Greg, where you want to go?
Yeah, I'm going to stay in the Big Ten. If anybody watched Illinois-Michigan State over the weekend, they know that it was a historically poorly officiated ball game. Kasparis Yakashonis was fouled out in 8.5 minutes on the floor, and at least 2, maybe 2.5 of those were just phantom calls where there's minimal incidental contact. Now, I think the internet has rightly taken that to task here. And Illinois battled and lost a game by 2 in which they had to overcome a lot of adversity, so I get it. But we're 4 days after this contest, fellas. Illinois is 3 games back in the Big Ten standings from a Michigan State team that the entire internet has decided is worse than Illinois, has less talent than Illinois, but beat Illinois. And Brad Underwood is still focused on the calls. He's at his media availability in the middle of the week saying he's petitioning the league, and they agree that they've never seen a star not get as many calls as Yakashonis. I don't know what they're still doing on this. I get it. You got to go to bat for your players, but also watch the tape. Kasparis is an extremely foul-prone player. He's lazy. He's handsy. He doesn't move his feet. The 5th foul in that game, after he already had 4 and had sat the whole game, he's jumping at a defender with his arm around the waist. So I feel like I'm taking crazy pills on this.
The 5th was dumb. The 4th was ridiculous, though.
The 4th was ridiculous. But given the ridiculousness, maybe don't jump at a Frankie Fiddler pump fake with 7 minutes left. And
fair.
I feel like I'm lost because the national media narrative coming out of that loss was, I actually feel so much better about Illinois. I think that is ludicrous, and I understand the logic behind it. But they are 13-5. At a certain point, I don't care what your ceiling is if you can't play to it consistently. They're 1-2 in their last 3 games. 1, yes, without Yakashonis, but they have more than enough talent to win a game against USC at home. We've seen this team with a healthy Yakashonis lose to Northwestern because they have 2 guys that can't guard anybody one-on-one, and Brooks Barnheiser just killed them in that matchup. We saw them lose to Tennessee at home. That's a win you would have loved to have because Kasparis made a bunch of mistakes late. I feel like we've seen this team lose 5 games 5 different ways. And all anybody wants to talk about is, well, their ceiling is so high, I'm impressed anyway. I want to see this team back it up. I want to see Brad Underwood focus, play to your ceiling 2 straight games, not once every 3. And maybe that can start at the time of this recording on Thursday night against Maryland at the State Farm Center.
Greg, I'm glad you're not a part of our college football coverage because hypothetical SEC matchups, that's all we do in college football world. If you put Alabama on a neutral field with, some good calls and the flags going their way, they got too much talent. They're just going to win the national title. That's what we did for 4 months. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you on Illinois, although I'm going to put you on the spot here. Brand new palate cleanser, brand new officiating crew, neutral floor. What do you make the spread at Illinois against Michigan State in a rematch?
In a neutral, Illinois minus 6.5.
Okay, there we go. So, I feel like you did a really good job arguing the one side that you had there. I feel like this is high school debate. You could just flip around and argue the other side. But I'm kind of with you. I do think Underwood had to go to bat for his players. I think that's kind of what he's doing, which is the opposite of what Cronin and Hurley have been doing lately. But it is a little bit kind of ridiculous to be doing it this many days after the game.
6.5. That's a lot of. You just went disrespect card in Illinois. I'm at like Illinois minus 4. Full strength regular refs. That on a. I'd be neutral. Wait, hold on. Let me see. I'll tell you right now. 3.5.
Woo!
3.5 on a neutral. 6.5. It would be like 6.5 at Illinois. And I basically had it as like a pick on Sunday, and I missed the opener. I'm glad I didn't bet it late. That so. Oh, any worry with? Did you see any? Because we were kind of questioning Purdue. I know you're really in tune, Greg, with the Big Ten. I was impressed with their win at Oregon, and then they come home and looked like they were about to roll Ohio State, and they get outscored 45-29 in the second half. Any takeaways in that game? Did a fluke like fluke game? Any concern from what you saw?
Very, very concerned. It was not as fluky as it appeared on the surface here. I think Mike and I both have some anti-Purdue thoughts for a matchup later this weekend, so maybe we save that. But
okay, yeah, we'll save it.
It was crazy.
So there is some concern there, Mike. Where do you want to go for your rant or bad?
Well, just quick to get it off my chest on the last show, Stuck. I had North Texas, and you know this feeling where some people got 8.5, some people got 9, some people got 9.5. One of the reasons why I was on the Mean Green at the Super Pit is that they're such a good foul shooting team, and they missed, I want to say, 12 foul shots, probably 5 of them in the last 90 seconds to either push or lose that bet by the hook. So that was brutal. I kind of touched upon the Dan Hurley just belaboring the point. I don't know if you saw his last press conference. He's just such a smug son of a bitch. I think he just loves it. He's just like, oh, the camera loves me too much, and everybody's a bunch of losers when they, basically critique me in any way. He's doing a good job of making the Big East a TV show that I want to watch, and in this case, I'm just hate watching it at this point. But it is just getting a little ridiculous that, as I said, the refs haven't taken it out on him and thrown him out of a game for his histrionics. The one rant that I'm actually having here that's kind of an evergreen rant for me, but I'm preparing to get disappointed on Selection Sunday. I want to get my head right here 6 weeks out from it, because there are some huge names on the bubble, like North Carolina, Texas, Iowa, Indiana, not all that dissimilar from the College Football Playoff Committee, where it's like there's so much talent on Indiana. There's so much upside to some of these teams. I'd much rather see, a shout out to Tanner, a 2-bid Big West or a 2-bid Missouri Valley. Give me Drake and Bradley. It's never going to happen. They're going to be sitting in a ballroom on Selection Sunday, and they're going to be one of the first 4 out. But I'm just trying to get myself right there, because they're going to squeeze in a deeply flawed North Carolina team or Indiana or somebody. I'm just not impressed with the big names on the bubble right now that are on quote unquote the right side by bracket matrix. But those are just, some of the rants I'm burning on right now.
I'd rather have some weird mid majors. Like, give me 2 or 3 weird mid majors that play like unique styles than 2 or 3 bubble teams that don't have any real threat. But some bubble teams have like profile of a sleeper. It depends. But I think getting some weird mid majors who have some upset potential always makes the tournament a bit more interesting. All right, let's get to the Futures Roundtable. I'll kick things off because you know where I'm going. I'm looking at a prominent book right now. Still 15-1 to make the Final Four. My true odds are like 11 for what it's worth, 11-1. We saw how Texas A&M can win games against anyone in the country when they shoot how they're going to shoot. 28% from 3 on the road at Ole Miss, with Ole Miss coming off a loss in the Egg Bowl at Mississippi State. It was a great spot for Ole Miss, and Texas A&M just uglied it up. And guess who was back? Mr. Wade Taylor. Still a little rusty, but he played 30 minutes, looked healthy. To me, this team could beat anybody any given day, as experienced as anyone. Been over it a million times. If they shoot well, great. If they don't, it doesn't really matter. And they're going to force you to shoot threes on a neutral court in the tournament. I think this team's super dangerous. They could play with anyone. I don't think they don't have national title upside, probably because of their shooting, but they can get to the Final Four. A little risky because you don't want them. I wouldn't want them in. I wouldn't want them in the same bracket as probably. I wouldn't even mind them against Duke, but a healthy Auburn, probably not. So that's the risk we take with these. But you know where I'm going. Texas A&M. I was super impressed with that win. They just that's what they do. That's their identity. Just scratch, claw, fight, brawl, and offensive rebound, turn teams over. Calabrese, I think I spoiled both of your takes with the good that I had earlier, but you're going with something related to Louisville.
Yes, I mean it kind of pains me because you've worn me down. I'm on A&M. I'm going to vote for A&M. No disrespect to whatever Greg brings to the table here, but you've won me over with the case and with Wade Taylor back. I'm in on it. But here I am immediately pivoting to a team that you just gave flowers to in Louisville. 20-1. I've seen 22-1 out of the market to make the Final Four. Haslametrics has U of L first in momentum in the entire country and first in away from home rating. And I agree. I just wanted to kind of test out where you thought they kind of fall on the seed line. I think probably if everything shakes out the way that I'm hoping, they'll get to a 4. And if that's the case, it's really about could they upset, an Auburn or Duke to get to San Antonio? Probably not. But if they can get a path where they have to go through Iowa State or Kentucky or Alabama, I think they could because we know the offensive system. 4 guards are averaging over 12 points per night. They bomb away from 3, a hallmark of a Pat Kelsey team. And when they're falling, they can beat anybody. And they're also top 40 in 2-point percentage accuracy as well. So this offense can cook. And you mentioned, in terms of the loss of Pryor and who was going to step up, I think at this point, James Scott has grown into that prominent go-to big role. He's capable of double-doubles now. He's shown it over the past 2 weeks. In a super manageable ACC, I don't think a 4 seed's out of the question. And then, like I said, it's just, 1 seed roulette. Avoid Duke, avoid Auburn, get lucky in that regard. And then I would love to be holding anything north of 20-1 on a ticket for the Cards to make the Final Four. So that's my take.
And Greg, where are you going?
This was a masterclass by Stuckey in this episode. He beats us to the punch on both of our similar plays that we love Louisville, just so we can position this back to A&M. Just pure magnificence from Stuck. But I'm also coming with a Louisville future. I just like the spin on them to actually sneak up and claim the ACC crown. It's plus 950. Now, I saw this, I think 18-1 about a week ago. Suddenly this has become a real possibility. You laid out all the cases of why to like the team. I'm totally with it. The thing that scares me about March is that I trust Louisville against teams that are just lesser opponents, way more than I trust Louisville against teams that have more talent, more size, and can provide some resistance, right? In March, you're going to see at least 2, if not 3 of those in order to get to a Final Four. In ACC play, you don't see any of them. I mean, their hardest game the rest of the way is Pitt at home. That's it. I mean, they've played all their hard games. They have 0 left against North Carolina, Duke, or Clemson. Duke still has to go UNC twice, once on the road, at Clemson. They've got at Wake Forest this week still. I'm not saying that Duke is in danger of falling off here, but it's fully plausible that Duke could lose 2 games and Louisville could win out based on what's left with their schedule. At plus 950, I actually like that play more than waiting to roll the dice in March. But once again, this was a Stuckey masterpiece today of positioning us how we have.
All right. Well, I don't hate that play, by the way. All right, so 1 for A&M, 2 for Louisville, Final Four, 3 for Louisville to win the ACC. All right, 1, 2, 3.
Gig 'em.
All right, so
we got it.
Game theory, Calabrese already told me he's voting for me, so I said, okay, I can't vote for Calabrese because then what if Greg does, and then I can break the tie if not. All right, so I got A&M on the board along with Illinois to go to the Final Four, and couch change play on a National Player of the Year on Braden Smith. Almost said Fletcher Lawyer. All right. Let's get to some rapid fire bets for the weekend. I'll kick things off on Friday. I mentioned this the other day. I don't know what's going on with Kent State at home. Like they barely beat Heidelberg. I don't know if that's like a character from Breaking Bad. They lost to Western Michigan. They got blown out by Western Michigan somehow. They lost to Miami, Ohio. I mean, you go back to, they barely beat Niagara. Something's going on with them at home. I don't know what, but they kind of cleaned it up on the road. Impressive win at Toledo. I think we're going to see this team go on a little bit of a run. I'm playing them tomorrow. I already played them. It was plus 2.5 is out there right now at Ohio. I think Kent State can control the glass here. And the reason is, this is mainly not a play on Kent State as much as it is a fate of Ohio. I mean, A.J. Clayton's out. He's going to be out. Got hurt last game. Aiden Hadaway, he's still out. Those are their two best players. Elmore James might be back with the team. Hasn't been with them the last couple of days. This is going to be an extremely shorthanded Ohio team. Without those guys, I make Kent State favorite here. So give me the Golden Flashes. Friday night, I think you have something, Calabrese, Friday?
So we're both on this Michigan-Purdue game, but from different angles. I'm going to start with a player prop. It just opened in the market. 18.5 points for Vlad Golden against the Boilermakers. I'm going to go over here. For anyone who hasn't watched a whole lot of Michigan basketball this year, they have that unique 4-5 pick and roll that Dusty May has basically brought in Danny Wolf to run that point forward position. It's created a world of easy buckets for Golden this season. Since December 1st, Golden is averaging 21 points per game, which is the most in the entire country among true centers, which is kind of amazing because you think back to him 2 years ago during FAU's run to the Final Four. He was a try-hard. He was somebody who was running up and down the floor, and if he got a bucket outside of, a layup or a dunk, you thought that it was kind of, found money on the sidewalk. All of a sudden, he's got some post moves. He has some athleticism. He clearly vibes with Wolf, and like I said, getting all those easy interior looks against a Purdue defense that without Edey is giving them up in just waves. So I think at 18.5, I would play this all the way up to 20.5. And then finally, in terms of his availability on the floor, in the past 2 months as well, his minutes have exploded. He's now reliable to go for 26 plus on a nightly basis as long as he doesn't get into foul trouble. And by being on the floor more, that's translated to more foul shots. He's gotten to the line a ton in Big Ten play, averaging over 9 shots from the charity stripe per game in conference. And then the last piece of it is, before I kick it over to Greg, Purdue, when you look at some of the comps and the bigs that they've faced, Dawson Garcia gave them 20. Janai Broom gave him 23. Derek Queen, 26. Great Osibor, 28. So I think all of this is pointing with the arrow up for a big game from Golden on Friday night.
Only thing I'd be concerned about is maybe potential whistle going against them. At Purdue, maybe foul trouble at Mackey. But before I pivot to you, Greg, to get your thoughts on this game, Danny Wolf had a historically bad, I shouldn't say historically bad, but a nightmare game. He did have 13 rebounds against Northwestern, but he couldn't score, and then he was getting destroyed defensively. Any concerns there for Michigan's ceiling?
For me, no.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the thing with Wolf, he's erratic. I mean, that's why this guy's not a lottery pick. If he was consistently playing near his ceiling, he would be a 10 to 15 range NBA draft prospect right now. But he's arguably the most turnover-prone player in the country, and man, they're unforced when that happens. And as you mentioned, Stuck against Northwestern, he just couldn't get going from an offensive perspective. But the special thing about Wolf is really not his scoring. If he gets you 20, it's a bonus. The reason Vlad Golden is so prolific this year is entirely that 4-5 pick and roll.
Yeah.
And when you think about this matchup with Purdue, foul trouble is the only concern I have with Mike's prop here, right? Because one of these two has to guard TKR. Kaufman-Renn is an elite scorer, and you don't know if it's going to be Wolf or Golden. That's probably a Dusty May toss-up. We might see both spend time. If it were me, I'd put Wolf on him. I think he's the more dynamic defender, and I think you'd rather just live with Vlad Golden just abusing Caleb First down low, which leads me to my large takeaway here. I spent the last week episode of the show singing Braden Smith's praises, why it's time to buy into Purdue, and then they have a letdown spot at home against Ohio State. Mackey Arena is an incredibly tough place to play. Picking Purdue to lose 2 straight games there is like signing up for your own death. However, this team has such glaring holes that previous Purdue teams have not. Their top 3 are special, but Caleb First didn't play on last year's team. He shouldn't be playing on this year's team. And if not for an injury to their freshman center, he wouldn't be playing on this year's team. They're small. They cannot guard the rim at all. I mean, they had 0 blocks against Ohio State. I think TKR, who's really been their center for most of the season, has 3 blocks on the season right now. Michigan's front court should absolutely abuse these guys. But the biggest reason that I like Michigan to win this game in Mackey Arena is this. Something weird is going on with Purdue's three-point volume. The last 3 games, they've attempted 13, 12, and 9 threes. Now, 13 threes against Washington makes sense because they take away the three-point line. They blitz ball screens. Their last 2 games, it doesn't make sense. Oregon and Ohio State are not great three-point volume defenses. And they've been able to just completely run Purdue off the line, force Braden Smith and Kaufman-Wren into these in-between, mid-range, tough 2-type shots. That's what Michigan's defense does well. They throw Vlad in drop coverage. They bait you into tough contested 2s. And the Dusty May offense is all 3s, all dunks. I mean, they go full games without even attempting a mid-range shot. It's basically Diet Nate Oates. So I think this is a perfect matchup for Michigan. I think you go down the previous 2 months, Purdue has lost the games that have been quote-unquote nightmare matchups in various ways. And I was really spooked by that second half against Ohio State. They should have no answer for Wolf and Golden, barring foul trouble. I like Michigan to win this game.
Yeah, pretty good matchup. Not the best spot, but if they can avoid, that's my one concern too, a Mackey whistle here. Just Painter getting in the ref's ear, and then it's like then it's cheddar time for way too long. I'm gonna stay in the Big Ten spot I had circled. Rutgers. I mean, Rutgers is not in the tournament conversation, but they're going to have a couple spots here, like at home, which is still a really good home court advantage in big games. They have like Michigan coming to town, Illinois coming to town in like the next 2 weeks, and Michigan State on Saturday. You got 2 lottery picks on your team who are now healthy. Like Rutgers' rating has been hurt by, Harper played 2 games where he shouldn't even been out there. He was just basically attempting to run wind sprints. You have Bailey and Harper and a team that one of the keys against Michigan State is you have to limit them in transition. It's Shocker. It's an Izzo team. Rutgers at least does that. It's not a vintage Rutgers defensive team, but they're good at limiting transition opportunities. Michigan State, I don't think is going to hold everyone to 25% shooting from 3. I think this is a really good spot for Rutgers. You get max effort here. If some of the projection sites are right, like I would love to get 6 or 7 on the open with the Scarlet Knights. Yeah, Greg, you have any thoughts there? Do you think it's a good spot for Rutgers?
Does it spook you at all that it's at MSG in the Garden, not the Rack? Because I would love this at home, but it's. Michigan State fans they hate that it's at MSG. I think they're like 4-13 under Izzo in the building.
I didn't even realize that. So I probably need. It's probably still gonna. Yeah, it's probably gonna open around 6. At Rutgers, it probably would have been 3.5. I'm assuming.
Yeah. There's the argument Harper and Bailey.
Yeah, I'll definitely get the line I want now.
Yeah.
I'll still be on it, but
okay.
It's I didn't even realize that going through my. It's marked as a. It's not even marked as a neutral, so it's just that's so weird to me. I don't know why I don't have that.
Yeah, it's weird. Even all the analytics sites have it as a true home game, which is strange. I don't get it either.
Interesting. Yeah, it hurts a little bit, but still a spot I had circled. Greg, where do you want to go next?
Next, I'm going to go to a Saturday game, and I think, at least I hope, we may catch Kansas at plus money at home against Houston here. And I think that I'm having deja vu to last year because, fellas, I could swear we did this dance with a Bill Self team that he clearly hated and had issues with certain personnel. And Houston was, the same number 1 defense in the country. It's just very similar profiles to what we watched a year ago. And Calvin Sampson hit the podium and did the whole, I can't believe we're favored at Fog Allen. Are you serious? When do teams be favored here? And then Kansas beat them by 13. And it wasn't all that much of a contest. I think this Houston team is great. Their guard play is definitely a step back from the last 5 years of Houston guards that we've come to know and love. And because they've been able to suffocate every team that they have played for the better part of a month and a half, we haven't had to talk about it, and it's definitely boosted up their metrics quite a bit because when you win games where you hold teams to 36 points like Utah or 46 points against TCU, you're going to look stellar. The reality is this Houston team has not beaten anybody. They have not beaten a top 35 opponent this season. And in games against quality opponents all the way back to November, but against Auburn and Alabama and even San Diego State, they had chances to win those games, and their guard play let them down. I just don't think this Houston team is good enough to go into Fog Allen and win a game comfortably, which at minimum means this is going to come down to the final possessions. And I think Kansas checks a lot of the boxes that you have to have checked to feel like you can beat Houston. You've got to have an elite post scorer, which both Auburn and, in my opinion, with Grant Nelson, Alabama have. Hunter Dickinson's good. He had 20 and 8 against Houston in this building last year. DeJuan Harris is a guy you can be comfortable against the physicality of the Houston guards. And the Kansas defense has been legitimately awesome. They're up to 4th nationally right now. I don't think they're that far off on that end of the court from Houston. So I'll take some home court voodoo here. I'll take a bet that this Houston team is riding a little too hot in the market right now. And if we get Kansas at plus money, I'm all over Bill Self and the Jayhawks.
Yeah, I agree. There's no, in this particular matchup against Houston, Houston is going to give up threes with their aggressive defense. Kansas isn't really a 3-point shooting team. You do kind of got to make threes against Houston, and Bill Self used in that first matchup, he used Dickinson brilliantly in pick and roll. But without KJ Adams, who does all the little things for Kansas, right? He does, defensively, he'll get on the glass when necessary, but he'll make the right pass, the right play. He's not going to make a three. So in this particular matchup, can you just get, can AJ Storr show up and hit a couple threes? More Rylan Griffin minutes could actually be helpful here in this particular matchup. So from a spacing perspective, Kansas might actually be better off in this matchup without Adams. So yeah, I agree. Pretty good spot for Kansas, one I had circled as well. Calabrese, what do you got next?
Yeah, I was very close to throwing in the Kansas play as well, so I think that's a clean sweep for us. Stuck, you basically talked me into Stanford the other night when you're like, I should just fade Miami. I was like, all right, let me look into some of these stats on Miami. How bad is it? Oh, man, they are at UMBC, Lemoyne, Prairie View A&M levels of defense. Prairie View A&M, by the way, their entire athletic budget, $15 million. That Miami team's getting paid, I think, $4 million in NIL, extra bonus cash walking around. So it's ridiculous that they've fallen off this hard. But at this point, I think I'm buying in a little bit on the Cardinal. And beyond just obviously beating Miami by 37, that's great. But I think that they can play their way onto the bubble, and Florida State is a team that I think is going to move off of the bubble in the coming weeks because they haven't played well in true road games outside of their 15-point win at Miami. And we're just discounting any performances against the Canes. The Seminoles, just point blank, they struggle on the glass. They find themselves near, 200th in defensive rebounding percentage. And when you're up against the big baguette, Max Reynaud, who's averaging 22, 12, and 2 stocks per game across his last 5, he has really blossomed in his final year on the farm. And, zooming out on the program in general, I'm a big believer in Kyle Smith. He won 25 games at Columbia, 25 at Wazoo, 63 in 3 years at San Francisco. Those aren't easy places to win big, to win in the 20s on an annual basis. And he was able to do that. And I think a part of it beyond Reynaud is that he's worked with some really quality guards. Frankie Ferrari, phenomenal name. Mado Lowe at Columbia as well. Last season, Miles Rice. Jalen Blakes isn't quite there, the Duke transfer, but he's getting more and more out of him lately. When you look at what he did against North Carolina, 20-7 in that game, if he can play anywhere close to that level, particularly on their home floor in a spot where Florida State traveled across the country, they lose at Cal Berkeley. Now this is their second game in the back-to-back, road games. I'm still going to go with Stanford here. I think it's going to be below 4. Certainly, I would play it up to maybe the edge of 2 possessions, but at 3.5, 4, I'm on the Cardinal here. I think the Trees are going to impose their will on the offensive glass, and Reynaud, I think, is continue to do what he's been doing in the past month, and I'll keep backing these guys.
Effect since November. Let's go. It's over the past 2 months. Effective field goal defense. Miami 362 in the country. Only teams worse, Bellarmine. And by the way, I have people that we're saying. I always say Merrimack. I'm gonna say that's my Delco. I know it's Merrimack, but I'm always gonna say Merrimack. Mississippi Valley State. Oh man, they're bad. 62% effective field. But that's it. Bellarmine and Mississippi Valley State, only teams worse than Miami. Effective field goal defense. It's so bad. Yeah, I like the way Stanford's playing of late. Let's go Troy against South Alabama. South Alabama runs a ton of zone on defense, and both of these teams had their games canceled, Troy and South Alabama, on Thursday. South Alabama on last week was blowing out Troy in that game. Super high variance team because of their zone. But Troy started to figure it out towards the end. South Alabama ended up holding on by 1. This is the next game. They got a week to prepare. I think it's a huge advantage to see that South Alabama zone defense again. I think it's a good spot, good matchup for Troy. Troy also can just dominate the offensive glass here. And yeah, they took care of the ball in that matchup for the most part. Turnovers have been an issue. So I like Troy. There's some variance coming to South Alabama, shooting like 37% from 3, allowing 26% with that zone. So I think this is a good spot for Troy. Greg, where are you going next?
I want to propose something incredibly dangerous to me and my family right now, but cover your ears, folks. I think that UConn may be a really bad basketball team, maybe just with no other caveats. I think this may be a bad basketball team. Stepping back broadly, their marquee wins this season have fallen apart. I mean, are we supposed to be impressed that they snuck by Gonzaga and Baylor? Is that what we're doing now? Those teams are in free fall. I just watched Baylor have to come from behind by 10 points against Doug McDaniel and Coleman Hawkins.
Wins. How about the losses to Colorado and Dayton?
I am just not impressed at all. And I think people are starting to catch on to this because Hurley will draw as much attention to himself at all times, but it's still a massive inefficiency to what I think they really are. Torvik agrees. I mean, since Liam McNeely went out, UConn's 59th nationally. Xavier, for their record, is 32nd. I mean, they've been playing a lot better in the last month, and I think it's a great spot bet, Stuck. Xavier, after the meltdown against St. John's, I mean, they were dominating St. John's.
Should have won that game.
Collapsed. They should have won the game. UConn very fortunate to survive against Butler. This UConn defense is just a disaster. In the span without McNeely, 166th nationally, but I mean, that almost it's almost the same as saying what they are with him. I mean, go back to the beginning of November. It's still outside the top 130. And if you're looking for free points in this game, Xavier really does get to the free throw line well. They're 50th nationally in free throw attempt rate. I understand that it's Hurley versus everybody with officiating, but this team doesn't foul because people have something against Hurley. They foul because they don't have any personnel that can stay in front of their man on the perimeter. I mean, there isn't anybody in a UConn roster that can prevent dribble penetration. So I love this spot. I think Xavier's the sizably better team at home, 8 p.m. tip on a Saturday night. Maybe this is the moment the entire college basketball world discovers that my hypothesis may be true.
Ryan Conwell, parlay that together, 25 points for Conwell, an upset. I mean, he's been boom or bust, but when he goes off, like you said, he gets to the line a ton. He did that, I think, against Nova the other night and had 30-plus, so I'm with you.
Yeah, Xavier's playing really well. I mean, you got to remember, they went to Marquette and won, and they should have won at St. John's, and they lost by 2 at home to Marquette. They lost in overtime earlier this season at UConn without Fremantle in a game they should have won. And I think people are still not all the way there yet to UConn. It doesn't mean they can't get there by March, but yeah, I mean, I agree. This isn't like right now, this is not a top 30 team in the country. And I do think they miss McNeely on the offensive end, especially in certain circumstances. But the whole narrative, I think, we'd be quicker to get there just from a national perspective. If they actually did lose to Butler at home, they needed overtime there. And Xavier at home without Fremantle, they needed overtime to get that win. Barely beat Butler on the road. So, yeah, it's losing at home to Creighton. The red flags are all over. And you mentioned the wins. Like I said, Colorado has been a disaster. I know they've had injuries and dealing with illnesses. Dayton, everyone was like, oh, Dayton. I mean, it's not like Dayton has been impressive in A10 play, and both of those teams beat UConn on a neutral court. So, yeah, I'm with you. I had this one circled as well. What else you got, Calabrese?
All right, I'm going to close it out for a game. I'm going to try to keep my voice down here so that the books don't hear it. Please give me 9.5 with UAB traveling to Memphis. This is a game I have had circled really for the past month because the Blazers started so slow as a team I was high on in the preseason. But since mid-December, there was that 3-point loss at the Super Pits in North Texas. No shame there. Other than that, they've been absolutely rolling. The offense is humming. Yaxel Lenborg has gone thermonuclear. Last 4 games, 22, 10, and 7 with 3 stocks per game. He's playing at, AAC player of the year level, borderline first team All-American, second team All-American kind of level. And they'll be happy to play even faster the way that Memphis under Penny likes to play. And really, it's not all that complicated. When Memphis is playing in the non-conference early in the season, when they get to March Madness, I'm interested in backing Penny. When it's coaches who pour over his tape, he gets out-coached in the AAC all the time. So I'm going to sprinkle on the money line, but if this gets close to 10, this is going to be one of my favorite bets of the entire month. UAB is just a team that I think, because the average fan is looking, I guess, at the overall record, and they're figuring that they're kind of middle class in the AAC. I don't think so. I think they're going to be able to bring the fight to the Tigers here. I think they'll flirt with the outright upset.
I say this all the time. I've missed out on like 6 straight winners. I say just fade Penny as a big favorite. I think they're like 0-8. Their last 8 is a big favorite against the spread. It's unbelievable.
Since December, they've won by 10 or more twice. So I don't understand where this market steam would come that all of a sudden they're going to beat the best team remaining in the AAC going away. I know they're at home, but come on.
Yeah, their defense just in these games when they're a big favorite just is there's no focus there. And their home court advantage is not as good when it's a big game, big game. FedEx Forum's awesome, but when it's like just a regular game, it doesn't have the same effect.
I'm salivating over Dane Danger trying to guard Yaxel Lendeborg already. I mean, that's any minutes we get with that is a huge advantage.
Yes. I'll throw out a couple more. Maybe this is the time to buy low in Colorado. Like they're finally fully healthy at Arizona. Arizona's got Iowa State on Monday. It's going to be a big number. I think Arizona's a paper tiger. They don't really turn you over, which is Colorado's biggest issue. I don't know. I got to see the number there. Nevada at home against San Diego State. I'm not a believer in the San Diego State offense. This game will be played in the half court, and it'll be a jump shooting contest. I trust Nevada. Davidson probably has a favorable matchup here, pulling out their bigs. Like that, it's going to be a lot of threes, and I trust Nevada to make them. A real ugly one and just a spot play. This team's real bad. They're brand new. They're kind of starting to figure out their offense. USC Upstate. They're at Longwood. You're going to get, I don't know. I mean, maybe, hopefully 14, but probably won't be that high. Upstate, I mean, Longwood's coming off 2 huge wins over Radford and High Point. They've been shooting like 39% from 3, but they're not a good shooting team outside of the kid Christmas. USC Upstate stinks. I worry about their turnovers here against the no middle, but they want to get out and run. Like they just want to run, get out in transition. And Longwood's a really bad transition D, really bad 2-point D. Neither of these teams have size, so like I don't know. I think they're going to get enough easy buckets and enough in transition to keep this close, and it's a pretty good spot. So that's my ugly of the day.
Mr. Dean for USC Upstate.
Love Mr. Dean.
One of the best freshmen in the country, and like you said, it's all about transition buckets. At 6'6", he puts it on the floor a couple times from half court, and he's at the rim. So I like that play against Longwood.
Curious to get your thoughts. Well, I'll close out. Let me close out the spots, and I'll get your thoughts on a couple games. You got anything left, Greg?
No, my list.
Okay, so I'll just ask a couple questions here. Any thoughts on Auburn, Tennessee?
I don't trust the Vols on the road, to be honest. Like I would love for them to get this chance without Broom at home because I'd be all over it. But Lanier's been so up and down. I do think to your point, there are more concerns than we see at the surface with Auburn, especially given the banged up nature even of Broom's replacements right now and what happened last game. But I don't know. The thing with Tennessee is like you've really got to trust Akpara, who defensively, okay, he's great, but it's not like Auburn even necessarily wants to score through the post anyway right now, and Akpara is not going to take advantage even without Broom. So I don't know. If Lanier gets nuclear, it's one thing. We might catch a good number too. I'm kind of wondering how the books are going to adjust without Broom. KenPom's got it at 8, but I kind of feel like Auburn wins by double digits without him anyway.
Yeah, Tennessee could crush the offensive glass here because I do think they miss Broom on the defensive boards a lot. I might end up betting Tennessee, especially on open, because this is what happened in the Georgia game. I made that line around 10.5. The Auburn minus 10.5, 11-ish at Georgia. And I have Broom worth like 5.5 points. And books opened it at 8.5. And it ended up closing at 5.5, 6? So I don't think that on the open they were properly accounting for the loss of Broom. And that number, it really could have mattered if Auburn didn't melt down late. Georgia somehow had a shot to win that game. But yeah, so I'm curious if it opens up at like 6, 5. I might have to take Tennessee. We'll see. Any thoughts, Calabrese?
I don't mind trying to catch the falling knife on an entire team, but on a player, that's a pass for me. Lanier is shooting sub 30% in the last 5 games, and he's a volume shooter. So with him shooting this way, they could shoot their way right out of this game. So I need to see like a bounce back performance somewhere where he can really carry this offense first before they get into deep water on the road against a team like Auburn. So it's just a pass for me.
Last one, Wake hosting Duke. And this will be a huge game for Wake. I mean, because as of right now, what would they? They would be, I don't know, I would say 10%, 20% chance of making the tournament right now. And they get this win, they're going to be right back in the conversation. They've won 6 in a row. My question is, they still they don't really have a point guard. So, like, are they going to be able to beat this elite Duke defense? And they can't really shoot. They're playing a lot slower because they just don't have the offense is ugly. I've liked their defense. I've liked the addition of Spillers, too, who I absolutely loved at App State. I think he's really helped their defensive versatility as well. Does this come down to, like, does Salas go nuclear, just like he did last year when Wake beat Duke when he went for 30? Is that what they need here? Greg, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. Which, if that's the recipe, I think you feel good about the recipe. I mean, he's got 5 KenPom MVPs his last 8 games, 20 or more points, 7 of 8. I mean, this most quiet game in a month was 14 against Carolina, and he just couldn't hit a 3 that game, 0 for 6. So, I think as good as the Duke defense is, the vulnerability to me would be a guard like Salas, who has some size, that's not going to be spooked by, the nature of Duke's guards all being 6'6". I mean, they're built more like fullbacks or wings, tall fullbacks, than they are point guards. But I think Salas is physical enough, athletic enough to still get to his spots, not be bumped off his spot. Salas is a guy that doesn't necessarily need to get all the way to the rim. He has the in-between game and the pull-up game. So I don't hate it from that aspect. The thing I hate for Wake here, which makes it hard for me to see, I think you've got to be able to hold up on the boards against Duke. And they just can't.
They can't.
They are an atrocious rebounding team.
Yeah, I think that is the past. Curious to see where this line comes out at. I mean, Wake's going to give you threes. Duke can make them too, which is scary. But I think in a way, Shire, I mean, they've won 12 in a row. They play in the ACC. like Shire might appreciate, and Duke hasn't been in like close games, so but Shire might appreciate if this game is like close with like 10 to go, just for like their season long prospects. Like I'm sure he wants them to get tested some in conference play and the ACC tournament before you get to March, because it's still a team that has 3 freshman starters. So I could see this being close down the stretch, but the rebounding, Wade's gonna need Duke to be off from 3 a bit, and they need Salas to go nuts. All right, and one last thing before we go. Time to throw it to Tanner McGrath for his America East quick Saturday preview. Calling this his redemption tour after his UMBC call last weekend. I'm expecting better of you. So what do you got for us this week, Tanner?
Thanks, boys, and welcome back to the Am East Minute, hosted by yours truly. Overarching thoughts as we enter week 3 of America East Conference play. I'm recording this before Thursday night's games, so standings entering tonight and before you listen to this are Bryant is 4-0, Maine's 4-1, Vermont's 3-1, Lowell's 2-2, Albany and New Hampshire are both 2-3, UMBC, NJIT, and Binghamton are all 1-3 or 1-4. A little where Tanner was wrong segment, aside from UMBC over Maine last week, which was disastrous. I guess Bryant is in fact the class of the league. I mean, they're 4-0 with dominant wins over Vermont and Lowell. The defense has seemingly self-corrected. They're awesome on that end because they rim and ISO funnel and then use their unmatched wing athleticism at all 5 positions to swat everything at the rim. I mean, they stand like 6'5" to 6'11" everywhere and have posted a 19% block rate in league play. Meanwhile, Rafael Pinzon's return from injury totally opens up the offense. But I'm still exercising caution. I still question their offensive execution. They still don't create super efficient shots in the half court or in transition. And if Pinzon stops hitting 50% of his threes, I wonder if things will maybe start to clog up again. They've also played 3 of their first 4 games at home, and they've been much, much worse on the road this year. And the entire season will likely come down to a 3-game late February road trip where they go to Vermont, Lowell, and Maine in consecutive trips. That said, I have no interest in fading them hosting Binghamton on Saturday. That game's at 4 p.m. Eastern. For some reason, the Bearcats' solid wing versatility on offense has not translated to the other side of the ball, where they are incredibly flat-footed. They can't stay in front of the dribble, and the rim defense really misses Tariq Balogun. Nehemiah Benson, his replacement at the 5, is really dangerous on offense, especially in transition, but Level Sanders has traded a lot of defense for not enough offense. It's also going to be hard for Binghamton's rim-oriented attack to get going here against a team that lives off of dominating the rim defensively. But I'm unsure if I can fully buy in on Bryant here, given my hesitancy toward their market rating and the fact that Binghamton had Thursday off, so they'll be extra rested for this battle as a likely double-digit dog. Speaking of Lowell's rebounding problem, they host New Hampshire Saturday at 2 p.m. I can't over-exaggerate how bad this problem is. Lowell currently ranks last in the league in both offensive and defensive rebounding rates. Duquette needs to figure something out stat. Now, do the Wildcats have enough juice to expose Lowell's massive rebounding issue? I'm partial to thinking yes. Since sliding Khalil Badru into the 4 spot, the Wildcats rank 3rd in the AM East in offensive rebounding rate. He and Okpomo are each grabbing over 2 per game. They scored 15 second chance points against Binghamton, 17 against UMBC. The half-court matchup is a little bleaker, obviously. The Wildcats, they just don't run offense. It's all isolation or hero ball with Sammy Pisas and Anthony McComb. And surprisingly, Lowell's isolation defense has been pretty solid. On the other end of the court, I highly doubt that New Hampshire can stop the flex cuts that Lowell loves to run, but Lowell's been running a lot more on-ball screening actions with Somerville. And New Hampshire's ball screen coverage has been a real surprise so far, especially in league play. I'll have to see where the line opens. I'd probably need over 15, but I'm thinking really, really hard about the Wildcats here. UMBC goes to Vermont at 1 p.m. on Saturday. It's a little tough to know what we're getting from Vermont these days. They've had to go with more game-specific plans, and they don't have the requisite shot makers to run the 5 out. Here against UMBC, the Retrievers match up well with Vermont on paper because they aggressively defend the 3-point line, which could stifle Vermont's typical perimeter-oriented offense, and they have plenty of shooting, so they could beat Vermont over the top on the other end. But opponents have adjusted by just feeding the ball to the interior against UMBC, where the Retrievers are helplessly small. I kind of expect a big Iliri Aofalei game here because his athleticism could really shine at the rim. And will UMBC ever be able to run their offense? Because they like to use like off the bounce rim attack and drive and dish stuff, but you can't get to the rim against Vermont with O'Leary still patrolling the paint, and the Cats are still pretty good at their catch and shoot closeouts with their backcourt leg. And UMBC was lifeless against Maine's press, and I've seen Becker use the press more than ever this year. It's still led by Shamir Bogues, who remains one of the better on-ball press defenders in the low majors. Probably a high-variance game based on if UMBC cashes their threes. Binghamton hit their threes in the second half against Vermont last week and crawled back for a cover at Patrick, but I do lean toward Vermont here, if anything. Finally, NJIT visits Albany, 4 p.m. on Saturday. We cashed NJIT first half last week. As I've mentioned before, the Highlanders have a really solid top 5, but they have no depth. 0 guys off the bench who can play with any experience, and the legs just go in the second half against everyone. I think I'll be going back to the well here against the Danes. To stop the Highlanders, you have to hold up against their ball screen and isolation actions against Francis and Sebrob. The Danes are a solid isolation defense because they're switchable, but they're also really small, and they're poorly coached, so their ball screen coverage is a mess. On the other end of the court, I'm worried that NJIT is going to get posted and reposted to death here against Albany. But NJIT has surprisingly been the best defensive rebounding squad in the AM East during conference play. Some of that is due to playing Maine and Lowell, but still. And I wonder if their slow pace could maybe mess with Albany's up-tempo style. Regardless, NJIT first half is almost always the play, and the Danes have been far from quick starters this year. Thanks, guys. I'll see you next week.
Good stuff, gentlemen. That'll do it for us. Thanks to Mike, Greg for joining me. Thanks to our producers on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. We will be back next week. Episodes, now 3 a week. 3-man weave early in the week. Myself, Mike, and Tanner McGrath. We do the Wednesday, Thursday look. And this episode comes out Thursday for the Friday, Saturday, Sunday look. Enjoy conference championships on Sunday and all of the college basketball throughout the weekend. Till next week, cheers.